This could happen to you. Brandon Blackstock checked into the hospital with a simple cold. By morning, his family had to say goodbye, but the truth? It was never just a cold. August 7th, 2025, Brandon Blackstock's family said goodbye. The doctors had no idea what the illness really was. They still don't.
Brandon had been battling cancer for 3 years. But to everyone else, he was still that successful music manager, always striving for the perfect life. His family, friends, and even his ex-wife, Kelly Clarkson, had no idea that the true horror was not just his diagnosis, but what had been happening in the shadows of his life.
It began innocently. A routine checkup, a small growth, but it wasn't a tumor at all, at least not the one they thought. Something more sinister was silently taking hold. A strange pattern emerged. Each visit to the doctor seemed to trigger a deeper, darker condition. His symptoms would worsen after each consultation. By the time his family realized the truth, it was already too late. His final days were spent in an isolated room in Montana, surrounded by the mountains he'd moved to for peace. But peace was nowhere to be found. Something was wrong in that house. It felt haunted. The walls whispered, the air thick with dread. Family members who came to visit swore they could feel eyes on them when they entered his room, even when Brandon was sound asleep. Strange sounds echoed in the night. A cold breeze would sweep through the house at the most unsettling times, as if something was waiting in the dark, watching them. Brandon's ex-wife, Kelly, once said she'd heard strange murmurs in the hallway the night before he passed. But it wasn't just physical. It was as if a part of him had given up the fight long before his body did. It was the betrayal of the body itself, the one thing he thought he could trust. The diagnosis wasn't just cancer, it was far worse. A malignant tumor was never the true cause of his death. It turned out Brandon's body had been slowly poisoned, not by cancer, but by something more insidious. Over the years, someone had been feeding him the wrong treatments, encouraging him to take alternative medicines that masked the symptoms, not the cause.
The cancer diagnosis had been a lie. His true killer had been hiding in the form of a trusted friend, someone close enough to manipulate and destroy. His cancer was a cover-up for the slow poisoning that led to his death.
The most disturbing truth? This was not an isolated case. Many other public figures had been misdiagnosed, or worse, manipulated into choosing paths that led them toward early graves. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we trust the most. They know our vulnerabilities, our dreams, our weaknesses, but that trust can be deadly. This is a cold, terrifying reality. Predators don't just lurk in dark alleys, they walk into your home every day, wearing the face of a friend or a loved one, and we may never even notice until it's too late. Safety. Tip: be wary of the too good to be true solutions. When in doubt, always consult with multiple trusted sources, especially when it comes to health. They found the true cause of his death. But it was the photo that was left behind. A last, chilling glimpse of the truth. Brandon's phone was discovered on the nightstand, open to a photo he never sent. His face, pale and gaunt, staring back at him. But there was something more in that picture. Someone standing behind him. Someone who shouldn't have been there. A reflection in the window, a shadow in the corner, a warning he couldn't even see.
The police never investigated further, but the family knows what they saw.
What if the betrayal was so close you never saw it coming? What if someone you trusted had already made their move before you even knew their name?
Do you trust your doctor? Your friends? Your family?
It had been a normal day for Brandon Blackstock, or so it seemed. The mountains outside his secluded Montana home stood still, as they always did, but there was something different about the way the wind howled through the trees that evening. It was as if nature itself was warning him. A subtle unease crept into his bones. Brandon, despite the looming presence of illness, tried to push through. He had always been a fighter, even if the battle wasn't one he could see with his own eyes. He had never been one to let sickness define him. But this felt different. He'd been experiencing strange symptoms for months. A chronic fatigue that never seemed to go away, a cough that felt more like an invasion than a mere irritant. But no matter how much he tried to push through, it was like a storm inside of him was slowly picking up speed, silently turning into a whirlwind. As the days passed, the symptoms grew worse. What started as mild chest pains turned into something much more insidious. His family would visit, and when they did, they noticed the change. His skin had grown pale, almost translucent. His hands trembled slightly like the hands of an old man who had lived a full life, but Brandon wasn't old. He was only 48. But there was something more off. Even when he laughed, his eyes seemed distant, lost in a place where no one could reach him. Sometimes it felt like he was looking right through his visitors, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the room, somewhere no one else could see. One night, his sister Savannah noticed something strange when she looked through the hallway window. It wasn't the view of the mountains or the rustling trees. No, it was the reflection in the glass. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a figure standing behind him. But when she blinked, it was gone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "Brandon, are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. He turned his head slowly, a faint, haunted smile tugging at his lips. "I'm fine," he replied, but his voice wavered just enough to betray the lie. He wasn't fine, not even close. That night, everything changed. Savannah had stayed late, as she often did, trying to offer comfort to her brother in his increasingly fragile state. She had grown used to his odd behavior, but tonight it felt more unnerving. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The walls creaked, the floorboards groaned underfoot, but it wasn't the house that bothered her. It was the silence, the eerie, suffocating silence that hung in the air. Brandon had gone to sleep earlier than usual, wrapped in a thick blanket despite the warmth of the summer night. Savannah, unable to shake her growing anxiety, decided to stay a little longer. She walked quietly through the hallway, passing his room and glancing inside. He was asleep, but there was something wrong.
The room was too dark, no light, not even a single candle, to break the oppressive blackness. She stepped closer to the door, trying not to wake him, but as she did, her foot caught something. A faint scraping sound filled the silence. It was a chair. His chair, the one by the window. It had been knocked over.
Confused, she opened the door, feeling a cold gust of air rush past her. A deep sense of unease washed over her, but she couldn't leave. She needed to make sure he was all right.
As she approached the bed, her breath hitched in her throat. Brandon lay there, but it wasn't just the stillness of sleep that unsettled her. His face had a strange expression on it. It was too peaceful, like a mask. His lips parted as if he was about to speak, but no sound came out.
And then she saw it. In the reflection of the window, she saw something, or someone, standing behind him. It was a fleeting image, but enough to make her blood run cold. The figure was tall, too tall for the room, and shrouded in shadow. She stepped back, her heart racing. Was it her imagination, or was something really standing there?
But when she turned back to look at Brandon, the room was silent again. The figure was gone.
She took a step toward the door, her hands shaking, but something stopped her. A small, chilling whisper echoed in her mind. He's not alone anymore. The days following that night were filled with confusion and mounting dread. What Savannah had witnessed, what she had felt in that room, was not just some trick of the light. She had sensed it before, that something was off, that the house, the atmosphere, was changing. But now, with Brandon's condition worsening rapidly, it seemed impossible to ignore. Brandon's family tried to get answers from the doctors, but the more they probed, the more elusive the truth became. The cancer diagnosis, the one that had first been delivered as a grim but expected prognosis, was the cover for something far darker. They had been kept in the dark. What no one knew was that the real cause of Brandon's decline was not just the cancer, but something that had been in motion long before his diagnosis. A secret had been hidden from them. Brandon had been poisoned, but not by an illness or some external agent. The poison had been introduced through his very treatment. Friends who'd promised to help, doctors who'd prescribed remedies, even family members who were only trying to make him better, had unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, contributed to his downfall. The truth was as ugly as it was terrifying. Over the past few years, a trusted individual, someone close to him, had been feeding him an alternative medicine that masqueraded as a cure for his cancer. But it was no cure, it was a slow, insidious poison. It wasn't just medicine, it was carefully crafted to look like hope, to make him believe he was getting better, to make him feel like he was winning. But he wasn't. He was dying, piece by piece. The person who had done this, they were still out there, blending into the shadows, wearing a mask of innocence, and no one knew it. And the worst part? The poison was still in Brandon's system, slowly killing him, and it had only accelerated his decline once the doctors had finally realized it was too late. Psychological insight. This kind of psychological horror, the slow betrayal of someone who should be trusted, is more than just disturbing, it's a real-life nightmare. The victims of these horrors aren't always found in alleyways or dark corners. Sometimes they're in your own home. Sometimes they're people you've known for years, trusted with your health, your future, your life. The key takeaway: you can't always trust what people say. Sometimes those who claim to help are the very ones causing the harm. Safety. Tip: be cautious with miracle treatments and always consult with multiple healthcare professionals before making major medical decisions. The police never found enough evidence to connect anyone to Brandon's mysterious decline, but the family knew. They knew the truth. Savannah found one last clue, a note Brandon had written just days before his death. The handwriting was shaky, as if his mind was fading, but the message was clear. Trust no one, don't let them in. And the final image that haunted her, the one she could never erase from her mind, was the photo on his phone. He had been taking it that very night, not of himself, but of something else. Someone else, standing at the door, watching, waiting. No one had seen them.
But the photo had been taken anyway. Would you recognize the person slowly poisoning you? Would you see the mask they wear, or would you only see the face they want you to see?
Do you trust the people you call friends? The ones you let into your life? Your home? Subscribe for your next chilling whisper.